That it's right in the centre of frame and right in front of the door, and just a few adjustments on the microphone. So that's the confirmation, Chris, that we can expect the statement very soon.
Yes, that's right. So the lectern in place, being plugged in. I think within the next 10 minutes or so here we'll hear from the Prime Minister. And this is the moment of transition as a Prime Minister comes out and says that his departure is imminent from Downing Street. Just looking over my shoulder, beyond the shot that we're seeing on your screen right now, some of the most senior staff in Downing Street. I can see the head of Boris Johnson's policy unit, Andrew Griffith. He is a Conservative MP in Sussex. Amongst the throng of those for whom a big change is coming, and for many their future in Downing Street will not be a long one from here on in. And I always think that when you see these moments and the gathering of staff, you notice that it's a moment of history, that this is a point where a Prime Minister is going to come out and say just what, 2.5 years, a little over that, from him winning a big majority at a general election, that he is soon to stand by. And we await, crucially, Hugh, the exact words that Boris Johnson chooses, how he chooses to define his own legacy and how he chooses to justify his decision, both his decision to resign as Conservative leader, but also his decision to carry on as Prime Minister until the autumn.
It's that debate, isn't it, that we've been hearing during the morning, Chris, about whether he strikes a note of, I suppose, defiance and says, well, you know, I still have a job to do and I'm still carrying on, or whether he does actually manage to summon up some more humility, as one of his own colleagues called for earlier. There's the scene in Whitehall, big crowd having gathered outside the gates of Downing Street there, and we've had a bit of entertainment from the crowds already, with some music being played, as it is often on these big political occasions, and the crowd, of course, stretching down Whitehall and even across the road towards the location of the Ministry of Defence, which is not too far away. Everyone aware that it is one of those rare days when we have a changeover in government, where we have a new Prime Minister eventually going to be appointed, possibly in the autumn. But as Chris was saying, that's part of the debate about this statement today.
Yeah, that's a very live debate, Hugh, this lunchtime. We've seen it playing out, haven't we, on BBC News in the last couple of hours, that there are Conservative MPs who simply do not think it is tenable for Boris Johnson to continue until the autumn. And we've seen in response to that, appointment after appointment, from the Cabinet to more junior positions. Andrew Stevenson, a former Transport Minister, appointed Minister without portfolio in the last couple of minutes. Boris Johnson determined to make the case that he can assemble a functioning interim government until the autumn.
So here you have a very good view of Downing Street, with the flags flying above numbers 10 and 11 Downing Street, and then the Whip's quarters there over to the left. There you can see the decking and the terrace where we saw those controversial images of one of the gatherings during lockdown, and there were questions asked about what exactly was going on at that time, whether they were work gatherings or not. And then we can see the inner courtyards within Downing Street itself, and just a little sense for you of how slightly higgledy-piggledy the whole complex is. It's, of course, a Georgian complex initially, but now it's evolved into something with lots of different bits to the building, lots of little corridors going in and out, and then over towards Whitehall and the Cabinet Office on the other side. There you can see the ranks of the media on the right-hand side, and then into the forecourt there of the and the courtyard of the Foreign Office over on the right-hand side there, where we can see the cars parked. Nick Eardley, our political correspondent, has joined me as well. And Nick, it's one of those days where we sense that big things are about to happen. We're not quite sure in what terms the Prime Minister will actually introduce the notion of his own departure, and it's not just a question of tone, it's also a question in this case of precisely what his plans are and when precisely he thinks he'll be out of office.
And that's not completely in his hands, Hugh. So the expectation is the Prime Minister will say he's going to stand down as Tory leader to start an election contest, he would remain Prime Minister in the meantime. Firstly, there are a number of Conservatives, I've just been on the phone to some of them, saying they think it's untenable, the idea that he would stay in office for a few weeks or even a few months. Secondly, it's not up to him because the 1922 committee, that committee of backbenchers we've heard so much about in the last few days, they decide the timetable. They could decide on quite a quick timetable if they agree with those Tory MPs saying that this needs to be over and be over quickly.
Just some of the shouts going on here, just to explain to you that this is all to do with setting the lectern in exactly the right place in Downing Street, because lots of the photographers here understandably wanted put in exactly the right position. It's a great view we have, because we've got Horse Guards Parade and all the stands in place for the beating retreat and all the other ceremonial glories that are being played out on Horse Guards at this time of the year, and that is right at the right to the left-hand side and just behind the big wooded area of the Downing Street garden. And then we can see at the top of frame Whitehall itself with the cenotaph just down to the right-hand side and the tribute to the women at war on the left-hand side, and the big white building of the Ministry of Defence on the left and the Department of Health there on the right, just to give you a sense of some of the geography as we see this. Of course, lots of this, Nick, part of a ceremonial route, which the Prime Minister, an outgoing Prime Minister, is very familiar with, because of course it's that route to the palace to see Her Majesty if there is an opportunity at that point to exchange the seals of office. But that goes to the heart of today's debate about Boris Johnson's decision that, for all kinds of reasons that he may actually want to express in his statement, he feels that he should be allowed to stay on, which is why, of course, we've had these cabinet appointments today as well. So we'll see exactly how he wants to present that argument, not just to his own colleagues in the party and not just to other parliamentary colleagues, but to the country, because this is a speech to a much wider audience than Conservative MPs.
Yes, absolutely, and I think part of what Boris Johnson will try and do over the next few minutes is to try and explain to the country what he thinks he's achieved, what he thinks he could still do in the next few weeks before he departs as Prime Minister. He's been a divisive politician. Boris Johnson has always been divisive. We're just watching now in the street, actually, his family coming out, senior ministers, his wife carrying one of their children coming out into Downing Street as well. On both sides, actually, where we're sitting, there are ministerial teams out to see the Prime Minister's final words.
Yes, let's come back into Downing Street and let's look at the crowd outside the number 11, because we have Carrie Johnson and we have little baby, and we have Nadine Dorries, who's of course one of the Prime Minister's most loyal and enthusiastic colleagues. So all of them, Nick, now here to witness what is for them surely a moment that they didn't think they'd be witnessing at this relatively early stage in a Prime Minister's career.
It's remarkable to think that it's only been 2.5 years since Boris Johnson won that incredible majority which gave him the chance
Well, here
to
he
govern.
is, Nick. Let's see what the Prime Minister has to say.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve, as I will, until a new leader is in place. So I want to say to the millions of people who voted for us in 2019, many of them voting Conservative for the first time, thank you for that incredible mandate. The biggest Conservative majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. And the reason I have fought so hard in the last few days to continue to deliver that mandate in person was not just because I wanted to do so, but because I felt it was my job, my duty, my obligation to you to continue to do what we promised in 2019. And of course, I'm immensely proud of the achievements of this government, from getting Brexit done to settling our relations with the continent for over half a century, reclaiming the power for this country to make its own laws in Parliament, getting us all through the pandemic, delivering the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, the fastest exit from lockdown, and in the last few months, leading the West in standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine. And let me say now to the people of Ukraine that I know that we in the UK will continue to back your fight for freedom for as long as it takes. And at the same time, in this country, we've been pushing forward a vast programme of investment in infrastructure and skills and technology, the biggest in a century, because if I have one insight into human beings, it is that genius and talent and enthusiasm and imagination are evenly distributed throughout the population, but opportunity is not. And that's why we must keep levelling up, keep unleashing the potential of every part of the United Kingdom. And if we can do that in this country, we will be the most prosperous in Europe. And in the last few days, I've tried to persuade my colleagues that it would be eccentric to change governments when we're delivering so much and when we have such a vast mandate and when we're actually only a handful of points behind in the polls, even in mid-term after quite a few months of pretty relentless sledging, and when the economic scene is so difficult domestically and internationally. And I regret not to have been successful in those arguments, and of course it's painful not to be able to see through so many ideas and projects myself. But as we've seen at Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable. And our brilliant and Darwinian system will produce another leader equally committed to taking this country forward through tough times, not just helping families to get through it, but changing and improving the way we do things, cutting burdens on businesses and families, and yes, cutting taxes, because that is the way to generate the growth and the income we need to pay for great public services. And to that new leader, I say, whoever he or she may be, I say I will give you as much support as I can. And to you, the British public, I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks. I want to thank Carrie and our children and all the members of my family who have had to put up with so much for so long. I want to thank the peerless British Civil Service for all the help and support that you have given our police, our emergency services, and of course our fantastic NHS, who at critical moment helped to extend my own period in office, as well as our armed services and our agencies that are so admired around the world, and our indefatigable Conservative Party members and supporters whose selfless campaigning makes our democracy possible. I want to thank the wonderful staff here at Chequers, here at Number 10, and of course at Chequers, and our fantastic prop force detectives, the one group, by the way, who never leak. Above all, I want to thank you, the British public, for the immense privilege that you have given me. And I want you to know that from now on until the new Prime Minister is in place, your interests will be served and the government of the country will be carried on. Being Prime Minister is an education in itself. I've travelled to every part of the United Kingdom, and in addition to the beauty of our natural world, I've found so many people possessed of such boundless British originality and so willing to tackle old problems in new ways that I know that even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
the statement by Boris Johnson announcing that he is to resign as Conservative Party leader and eventually as Prime Minister. Nick Eardley, our political correspondent, listening to that with me, and just wondering, Nick, what you made of the statement itself, and did it tell us anything new?
Boris Johnson is going to try and stay on until a new Conservative leader is found. We know that many in his party don't want that to happen, but that's certainly his intention. After that speech, there was a certain tone of defiance, I thought, in there, talking about the Conservative Party moving and talking about the herd. When the herd moves, it moves, was the phrase that he used. I think a sign there that he will say that this was about the Conservative Party rather than the country turning his back on him. We know that for the past 48 hours he's been making the argument privately and his allies publicly that he could still win an election, that